Hi there, I'm Colin and you're watching my Flosstube channel, Stitchpocalypse. This is my 12th video and today we're going to be celebrating Sampler September. Yeah, what do I want to say? Today I have one start and 4 whips to show you. Because it is Sampler September, everything I'm working on in the month of September is a sampler, and like, I guess a sampler in its traditional definition. So if you're not into that kind of stuff, I will not have anything of value to show you. I'll show you what I've been working on, and then we may have a discussion. I may talk a little bit at the end of the video just about some things. I don't know how to say it because I don't know if I'm going to talk about it. So we're going to start off with my start. So I haven't filmed since it was August the last time I filmed. And so that means I haven't shown you what my planner looked like for last month. Here's what August looked like. I filmed 2 floss tubes and I did have a finish, which is very exciting. And here's what September looks like so far. Big sticker for a start. Yeah. So, whatever. I don't need to, I don't know. No one cares. So this first thing that I started was something I think I talked about in like maybe the 2nd or 3rd floss tube video I filmed, like way back in maybe February or March. I talked about how I really love the sampler, which is Ramoncita Pita from European Reproduction Sampler, which is a Mexican sampler that was charted by European Reproduction Samplers, also sometimes known as Samplers Berlin, or yeah. My finished project will not look like this. And so we'll do things in order. In the video, I talked about how I love this sampler because it, to me, spoke to like additional complexities in sampler production beyond what some of the more I guess we'll say mainstream pop cross stitch business owners, and because to me it's very exciting because it exists beyond sort of their ideas about how samplers were made in the past, because the idea that we kind of get pushed on us all the time about old samplers is that they were made like in schools, right? And there was a teacher who like had a specific style, and all of the people who were stitching samplers in that way would have stitched in the same style as the teacher. And that's probably true in many places, and that certainly is true about some schools, but to me, just from the like reading I've done and the researching I've done, I think that it's like an overly narrow view of how samplers were made. And the reason that I think that the view is so narrow is because the people who have done a lot of the research or who have funded a lot of this research, primarily Betty Ring, was actually really only interested in seeing things through that viewpoint, and so was actively uninterested in researching samplers that existed outside of her like preordained viewpoint. Don't shoot me. And so I like this one so much because it is a Mexican sampler. It was made in Mexico, but it also exhibits tendencies of samplers from other regions in the world, primarily some of the like French alphabets that we see all over different samplers in France, and some of the motifs being much more like drawn from German and French influences, but then made by probably a Spanish girl living in Mexico, while still having some like very, maybe not traditional Mexican motifs, but motifs that would not have existed in any other place because it is like distinctly Mexican. And in those instances, I pointed out sort of this landscape, which very much looks like various places in Mexico and also like the American Southwest. And there is a Chihuahua right here, which obviously is like a Mexican dog. And so to me, it's interesting because I feel like it maybe not proves my point, but sort of pushes ideas about samplers and images being drawn from a variety of cultures, not just sort of a top-down approach of like a teacher creates a style and then pushes that style onto her students, which I'm not even arguing might not be true about this one, but I'm saying at some point the teacher also was being like, I think that the argument that like exists in Girlhood Embroidery by Betty Ring and like by all of the people who go to Sampler Symposium and push Betty Ring's ideas onto unsuspecting buyers at the attic, does do a lot of work to make it seem as though like the woman who is the teacher is also not being influenced by both her own culture and other culture and things from other places. It kind of like puts it into this box and doesn't allow the research to like exist outside of that box. It makes sense in my mind. I don't know if it makes sense to you. I'll cut that out if it doesn't make sense. Or I'll leave it in because I think there's something fun in being incoherent. Yeah, and so I am not stitching mine like this. I did not really feel like buying a piece of fabric this big. It's a huge sampler. But I have been very drawn to this, and I think that in many ways it sort of encapsulates some of the complicated things in my own life. For those of you who don't know, my partner Isaac is Hispanic, but not in... At some point along the lines, his family was what we would call Mexican, but they've lived in the area that we now call Arizona for hundreds and hundreds of years before, you know, when it was owned by these people and then it was colonized by these people. And so, I guess it, to me, captures sort of a blending of our two lives together in an interesting way. But I didn't want to buy a piece of fabric this big. And so I am taking various motifs and stitching them on the fabric in a way that I like. Another thing to note about Ramoncita is that she... Oh, here's what it looks like so far. Ooh. So at some point during the making of the original sampler, she changed from stitching 1/2 to stitching 1/3, probably to like take up more space. Whether that's because she got tired of stitching or because she ran out of motifs that she was interested in, like there's no way of knowing. But and so this is stitched both 1/2 and 1/3, and so you get kind of a interesting textural element. I am stitching this, yeah, 1 over whatever on 40 count mallow linen. Yeah, 40 count mallow, which I think is by Zweigart. I'm pretty sure it's by Zweigart. I'm stitching with Soie silks. This is my, I actually don't know where the bobbin I've been actually stitching off, but I'm stitching with number 137. And so this is my take on like a red sampler. This is my take on a monochromatic sampler. I'm having a lot of fun with this. Yeah, I don't quite know what else to say about it. It's fun, it's interesting. I've spoken quite a lot about it in depth before. I will talk a little bit about some of the motifs that I am excited to stitch on it. And so one of my goals with stitching this is I want to get the whole way across the top. And it's probably gonna go to like here. I'm not doing a border on the top. The alphabet is gonna be on the top. And so I wanna get the whole way across the top. And then I will get the whole way down one of the sides, which will be, I'll show you in a minute. So that way I can figure out the size that I want it to be. And then I'm gonna figure out where the middle is from the size that I've kind of just like decided through stitching. And in the middle I will be stitching this little chihuahua. And so it's gonna go right in the middle and maybe have like 4 different borders surrounding it. Growing up, Isaac's mom and his family, they always had chihuahuas, and particularly the chihuahuas they had were usually like desert chihuahuas. And so he grew up in Arizona, and he grew up in a town like over the mountain from Tucson. It's like in a valley near Tucson, but it's not within the city. And it's the desert. And so a lot of times what would happen is that people would have these dogs, these like puppies and these chihuahuas, and they would get sick of taking care of them because that's the thing that people do. And they would just drive out into the desert and they would dump it in the desert. And so because the town Isaac lived in was like nearish enough to the city that people could get to it kind of fast, but not so close to the city that anyone would see them, there were kind of, maybe not regularly, but certainly there were dogs that would just like show up in their yard or like in town, and his mom and him and the people in his family would like take in these sort of desert dogs. And so he always had some kind of dog growing up that was always like usually a Chihuahua mutt. And so he really loves Chihuahuas. He really loves little dogs. I don't know. But I'm excited to stitch that one. I was very excited to stitch these flowers here, which I have already put in. There's some things down here I'm excited to put in. I'm excited to put in this little dog. And this border up here is very interesting to me. But so what I'm gonna do is build out the border so I can get the size right. And then I'm gonna put the Chihuahua smack dab in the middle and then sort of go around it doing like larger motifs first, and then filling in the empty spaces with increasingly smaller motifs. And the goal is that it will be just like incredibly dense and like very kind of not messy, but you can kind of see already how what my vision is for it and how. Yeah. A thing to note, I already have a pretty good plan of how I'm gonna finish this. And so the size that I've decided on for this, I think it's 15 by, I have it written down. It's gonna be 15 by 18, so 15 inches by 18 inches. And specifically, so I'm gonna Okay, so we went maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe last weekend. We went to various like vintage stores and like flea kind of situations, like antique malls, that kind of thing. I think we went to 2, and then we went to a third one on a different day. And at one of them, I found. Oh, I probably should just get the. I'm getting up a lot. So I found this. Ooh. I'll scoot back. Oh, I won't scoot back because I have a piece of haul that I guess I'm showing haul now too, but I'm gonna stand up. Wow, what a disaster. This is a very poorly planned video. I found this, which is like a display for embroidery, and so you attach it to these top 2 bars, and then you attach it to these bottom 2 bars, and it kind of stays taut within this thing, and it can sit on the floor. Whatever. But this is what it looks like. You can see the feet and yeah. And it had this piece of cross stitch on it that honestly, like, I don't know. I'll probably just like hold on to it because I understand how long this must have taken to stitch, and so I feel weird about like throwing it away, but also I have no desire to like own this. And so this was displayed on it, which was like a animal rhymes shaker poem thing from 1882. It's not marked in any way, so I don't know who made it. But I guess I don't want this. I don't really know what to do with it, and I don't feel good about throwing it away because like I understand how like annoying and tedious this would have been to make. I am like obsessed with this cat. Which I guess is actually a tiger, but yeah, and so I took that off because I was like, I don't want that up in my house. That is not what I'm like. I don't know, but I am gonna make this and put it in the display like it was, and I might finish it with like some tassels and some like buttons, and I don't know. I guess I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, but I do have big plans. But yeah, so this is Ramoncita Pita, 1861 to 1862 by European Reproduction Samplers. I really love European Reproduction Samplers. This is the first thing I've ever done from them, but they have so many like interesting samplers that in styles that we don't. I don't know. I think that like when I think about the American sampler reproducers and the British sampler reproducers, like Hands Across the Sea, or like maybe not the Wishing Thorn, but like some of those other really popular, really big sampler makers, they end up reproducing pretty similar stuff that's symmetrical and has a quote in the middle and a house. And I think I like European Reproduction Samplers, the company, because she's reproducing things that like those kinds of makers are not interested in. Like this Mexican sampler, which is in the Cooper Hewitt, it's not like it's you guys understand what I'm trying to say. I have issues with the choices that a lot of the sampler reproducers are making. This really has been maybe like a couple weeks of me feeling I've never been really excited by most of the people who do reproduction samplers. I think that a lot of them are really tied to like recreating the past and yearning for the past to reappear. And I think that like with the violence that we've seen, particularly last week with the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the response of some of the cross-stitch designers and reproducers, I think for me it's become increasingly clear that I am drawn to reproduction samplers for opposite reasons than most of the people who are at least designing reproduction samplers. Yeah, that might be all I say about that. I might talk about it later too. But that's my most recent start. I actually like stopped stitching it like a half an hour ago so that I could show it to you. I was not planning on showing it to you at all, and I was planning on waiting until my next Flosstube because I feel like I wouldn't have enough work done on it, and then I actually got a ton of work done on it. So I showed it to you. That's that. But we're going back in time. A couple weeks ago, I worked on Anno 1817 by Reflets Soie. I'm going to show you a couple Reflets Soie pieces in a row. I love Reflets Soie. It's another thing where like, I think it's maybe because I like don't understand what they're saying. Like she could be saying slurs. I mean, she's not saying slurs in this, but like she could be saying slurs in this and I wouldn't know because I don't speak French. But yeah, I feel more drawn to the European reproducers than I do to the American ones because I think more so I just like have some distance from it in the same way that like I can't see it as clearly as I can with the American ones because like race is so different here than it is there. Not that racism doesn't exist in Europe. But yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Basically, I am drawn to the more interesting and like distinct reproductions, and I don't feel like whatever. Reflets Soie. I am stitching this on 32 count Smoky White by Zweigart, which is like a printed fabric similar to Vintage Country Mocha, but with like a white and light tan color. This is, honestly, the thing is like I haven't looked at this in a couple weeks because I haven't worked on it in a couple weeks. And I pulled it out and the first thing I thought was I've gotten so much work done on this, which is crazy because like, yeah, Colin, you've been like I've been the one doing it. Yeah. And so this is what it looks like. Oh. I just hate getting on my board, and this is just such an awkward size. Okay, I've backed up enough. So I'm stitching this. Okay, so I'm stitching this on 32 count. Smoky White by Zweigart. This is what it looks like. I started this. Oh, I didn't say that. Ramoncita Pita was my birthday start this year. My birthday technically isn't for another week, but I was getting like start mania, and so I started it like a week early. But this I started last year on my birthday. Also for Sampler September. So this is what it looks like. This most recent time I worked on it, I did this mending section and I stitched, I think, some of this border up here. And I also stitched this. I'm gonna give you a close-up of the mending section. So this is a mending sampler. It was I'll just do my spiel about it. It was a tool that like girls were using to learn how to mend clothes and other woven materials. Where essentially you do a running stitch through the fabric, and then you float the fabric over top of the place where the hole would be, and then you do a running stitch. And the way that you sort of place the stitches in the fabric can recreate the weave of the fabric, and so then it would like blend in. This particular mend that I did was a basket weave, which is actually very hard to tell because I used 3 different colors like in different rows, but it looks really cool. And I'm doing this with my own DMC conversion. The original is charted with pretty muted colors, and just from like my Googling and stuff, most of them seem to be pretty bright, because the girls would want to be able to see the work and like show the work to their teacher, to like prove that they're doing it correctly, which is if you were using more. Sorry, I'm watching myself and like my computer keeps like skipping and it's making me uncomfortable, so go away. But so I've done it with my own conversion to like really pump up these colors. I had originally done it in silk. I do not recommend doing any of these with silk, particularly if you're doing it on something like a 32 count like I'm doing. I think if you're doing it in like a 46 count, you could get away with it. But I found that the silk within the linen is way too slippery for the way you have to put the stitches in. And it was like falling out and really hard to stitch with. And I've gotten way more work done way faster since I've switched over to the DMCs, but I've still left the sections that I've done silk. But yeah, so here's the section that I did. I already showed you that, and I'll show you the back so you can see how it like what the floating looks like and what the yeah. And so that's what I did on this. I love this. This is something that I like really am really proud of. I've done really amazing work on this, and even though it's not cross stitch, I mean there is cross stitch on it, but there is a lot of other types of stitching happening on this. I really do think that it's made my skills much stronger when it comes to my cross stitching. So there's that. And so I just have 2 more mending motifs to do. There's one that goes right here, and then there's one that goes up here. And at this point, I'm like barely even doing, like I don't even know if I would say that I'm doing this chart. I would more so say that like my work is inspired by the chart, but I've made so many changes and like I've squished it and moved stuff around that it's like actually almost a different thing. Yeah. And so that was Anno 1817 by Reflets Soie. One of the reasons I only have 5 things to show you is because I actually worked on one thing over like 2 stitching. I don't times. So the way that I stitch is I only stitch on one thing for like a 4 or 5 day period, and then I put it away, and then I pull something else out and I stitch on that. And I have like, maybe not goals, but I like stitch it until I have finished specific thing. Like when I pull it out, I think, oh, I'm gonna stitch here and I'll do 2 motifs, or I'm gonna stitch here and I wanna finish this color, or I'm gonna get to here on the chart, or those kinds of things. And I never, between 2 floss tubes, I never work on something twice, except I did this time. And that's because I was unhappy with something I had done previously on this. And so I am here to show you Franzi 1870, also by Reflets Soie. This one is a like Biedermeier Berlin woolwork sampler. which would have been done in silk on the top and then like wool on the bottom. I previously, someone's calling me, it doesn't matter. Previously I had done this block, and I don't think I said this in the video, but I was unhappy about how open it was, like how much of the fabric you could see behind it. Part of which is because it's like a lot of 310, which is thinner than the other ones, and part of it is just the nature of the way I'm stitching it, which is like 4/4. And so I had stitched it. Maybe I'll put a photo of it in. If I remember to put it, if I take a screenshot of my last video, I'll put it in. If I don't, I'm sorry. But I went back over it. So here's what it looks like now. I'll just show you the whole piece and then I'll show you the section I did. So this is what my work looks like now. I have still not made it to the top. So there is still like maybe this much more at the top, but this is what it looks like. But this section at the bottom, I had just done crosses and I was unhappy about how much of the fabric you could see behind it. And so I went back over it with an additional 4 threads to make it a Smyrna cross. And so now it looks like that. And I do just think it looks so much better. And you can't actually really tell on camera, like I'm looking at what it looks like on camera, but it has this like crazy raised texture because there is so much floss like packed into this box, because essentially there are 16 strands like in the middle, where in the middle of each sort of Smyrna cross where the things cross each other, it is 16 strands high. So imagine 2.5 of your embroidery of your like DMC floss is high. That's how high this is. That's like how much it comes off the fabric. But it like looks really interesting, it reflects light really interesting, and it feels really cool. And I will probably do some of the additional blocks also in Smyrna crosses. Not all of them, but maybe ones that have like more block stitching. Like this one, you can see through it, but because the colors don't actually touch themselves too much, it kind of just blends in that you can see the fabric through it. Whereas like for this one, because it was huge blocks of black, you could it was like definitely obvious that you could see the fabric through it. And so I went back over and I did it in Smyrna crosses, and it just looks so good. And I think I used a whole skein of DMC 310 just on this block between the 2 times that I worked on it. But I had shown you this in my previous Flosstube. Not with the Smyrna crosses, but just with the X's over it. And so I did that, and then I also finished this motif here, and then the rest of these flowers, which come up and down here. And some of these flowers are really crazy. This one in particular is like a really psycho color. Here's what the back looks like. I'll show you the back of this section just so you can get a better idea of like how I'm going about it. The thing about Sampler September and being like, I'm only stitching samplers and I'm only showing you samplers, is that the reality is I'm only showing you like my favorite whips. So this is like a best of my whips, right? A list of the whips that I love the most that I'm working on, a list of the stuff I'm most excited by, that I find the most interesting or the most scary or the most whatever. I find that a lot of the stuff that's being designed now, it's actually pretty easy to stitch. And I think that if I was only stitching like newly designed patterns, I actually don't think I would like stitching as much as I do. But I'm also not the type of person who uses stitching to like deal with the stress in my life or to like calm myself at the end of the day before bed or any of those things like a lot of people do. Like I think a lot of people use stitching as stress relief, and I think a lot of people use it as like a way of like turning their brain off or like not having to think too much, and that's like the opposite of what I'm doing it for. I actually like want it to challenge me more and more, and so yeah, that's the reality is the samplers do that more than the newer stuff or like the stuff that comes out right now. Like I stitch animal crackers, I'm not gonna be like hating too hard on the new stuff or the trendy stuff, but an animal cracker involves much less like thinking and decision making than something like this does, because of situations like this where I've made a decision about the fabric and I've made a decision about the size that I want it to be on, and because of that it doesn't quite work, and so then you have to find a way to make it work, and in many ways the way you find to make it work actually turns out even better. Sorry to Miss Franzi, I'm doing it better than you. Trash. Anyway, that's Franzi. You've all seen it. It's like I work on it constantly. Once this video is done filming, I'm gonna work on it some more. It's very special to me. And so I worked on that every day for maybe like 8 days, maybe 9 days between the two floss tubes and whatever. Here's another reproduction and another big boy and another funny one. After I had done the smear crosses on Franzi, I worked on CRS 1713. This is part 2 by Hicks Creates. I've already finished part 1. This is another German cross-stitch pattern. I don't think I've ever seen anyone stitch this. I don't see anyone stitch it. I think it came out like last year, the year before. It came out last year. And I did, so the parts that I worked on is I worked on this stag and I worked on the bird over here, and then there's a like star shape that I put in because I am moving some things around because I don't want to stitch the peacock. And this is what it looks like. Oh, this is another one. It just looks so good. I'm just so talented. Yeah. Oh, maybe I should try holding it sideways because I guess it's the same. Yeah, that fits on screen. Yeah, so this is what it looks like. In my last floss tube, we talked about the pelican and her piety, which is here. And I had also stitched this bird here. But since showing it to you last, I have stitched this little sun. I have stitched this stag, which is upside down on like the chart. And so the thing is, like, I'm realizing in this exact moment that the way I'm interested in finishing this and showing it means that like it's not going to have a top or a bottom, like every side is equal, and so I'm not going to show it. I'm showing it to you right side up because it's cuter. And so I stitched that stag and I stitched this little bird over here. I just love working on this piece so much. I hit a wall with it a couple months ago where I was like working on it over a lot of time, but just like could not bring myself to actually stitch on it. Mainly because every time that CRS's initials are in it and the year, I'm sort of flipping the motif, choosing other colors, choosing other similar colors from the sampler, and stitching my own initials and the year that I'm actually stitching it on. So it does say my initials, CTM 2025, and then CRS there. But yeah, I kind of hit a wall when I was here because I had already stitched this motif and I was like kind of sick of it, which I think is normal for people to not want to, which is also why I don't do symmetrical samplers, because I do not want to stitch the same motif twice. I don't like doing it. I don't really like how it looks that much either. And a lot of times you'll hear people talk about motifs as being like a way for people to have pattern books for images they're gonna like stitch later on their clothes and tablecloths and stuff, which I think is probably true in some cases, but I also think that why would they stitch it twice? If it, like, to me, it's like obviously a decorative object as well as a tool, but because if it was just a tool, you definitely wouldn't stitch it twice. Because you wouldn't care if it was symmetrical, because you wouldn't care if it, like, looked cohesive enough. Whatever. You guys maybe know what I'm saying. I don't really know what I'm saying. I've had a long day. And it's only going to be longer. But so I stitched the stag, and it's just so cute, and the... Oh, and I do have a question. So on the chart, this stag, it looks like it's holding like the hilt of a sword in its mouth. But now that I've stitched it, I wonder if it's like flowers that it's holding. But I don't know if any of you know anything about stag-related motifs in the 1700s in Germany. If you let me know, that would be really cool. Oh, I don't know what that was. But yeah, this is CRS 1713. I am almost to the bottom, part 2. And there is a... in here, there is a peacock that I will not be stitching. Because I hate peacocks. And so I'm trying to get to the bottom, and then I'm going to go down and then back up. But this is what it looks like. Which to me is just so beautiful. I always wonder if, like, I do think that I'm kind of in my little Flosstube bubble right now, which is good for me and is kind of what I want. I think that I'm in not enough of a bubble in my, like, day-to-day life, and so I really have, like, retreated into a Flosstube bubble. But there certainly are, like, Flosstubers who have a lot of views, and, like, cross-stitch designers who obviously are very successful, who I never see anybody in my bubble talk about. And, like, Jan Hicks is one of those people who I'm like, I know people are buying it, but, like, I don't know, they're not in my bubble. She must speak to a different group of people. That's all that, whatever. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Then I was kind of tired of reproduction samplers. But not really. I never get tired of reproduction samplers, and they're all quite different from each other. But I do think it's important to, like, keep a good handle on some of my older whips. And so I worked on my oldest whip, which is the Beast from Long Dog Sampler. I got a lot of work done on ridiculous. I got a lot of work done on everything. Yeah. For this one with my like color choices, I've chosen kind of like a blackish brown, like mushroom color palette with pops of red and gold. That was like inspired by a couple different things, but a big one was the cover of Revolutionary Demonology, a book by Garpo de Nun, and also like printing presses, and trying to make the letters on this look almost stamped. But here is where I am. And so recently I mostly worked on the lion. I did some border work, which is not interesting and not worth showing, and I don't even remember what parts of the border I worked on, but I know I worked on some borders. But most of the stitching of note happened here on this lion. The last time I showed it to you, I only had his face done and the crown. And so that's what he looks like. This is what the back looks like. I don't really have much of a note to say about this today. It looks good. I enjoyed stitching on it. That's kind of where we are. But yeah, I think that I would like to get more of the actual stitching done. Then I'm feeling a little backstitch burnt out on this piece because it is so backstitch heavy, which is, I'm not going to pretend like I didn't know it going in. I certainly knew it going in. But I would really like to get all of the stitching done in this like middle band done in the next few months. I don't want to say by the end of the year because that's only 3 months away. But I think by spring, it would be nice to have all of the back stitching done on this band and all of the stitching done, all of the actual cross stitching done on this larger band. So, but that's what it looks like. Mine will probably not look that much like it because of the colors I've chosen. And yeah, I think the line's very noticeable on the chart and on the photo, but it's way more noticeable here. So that's all that I really have to say about it. Yeah, and so that's kind of all the stitching I have to show for you. I am going to continue working exclusively on samplers for the next couple weeks. It's 17th, so the next 2 weeks, and then I don't know. I don't know what's after that. I don't think I'll have any more big starts this year. I think that Ramoncita Pita is going to be my last big start of the year, which puts me at 4 big starts this year that I'm still like working, that I haven't gotten rid of, which to me feels good to have 4 big starts and maybe 6 smaller starts that are then getting like finished. I just like don't want to be one of those people who has 50 whips or like 100 whips, because I think if I get to the point where I'm like not stitching on something at least every couple months, I should just get rid of it. Like if I can't muster up the energy to work on something for like 4 days every 6 months, then I'm not going to stitch on it at all. At least that's knowing myself and my kind of whatever, that's kind of just how it is. Yeah, I guess, and I do want to say, there are a couple other things that I want to, I have a piece of haul to show you. it's not haul in the sense of like, here's a chart or here's a bunch of fabrics or here's fibers or whatever. It's a Facebook Marketplace find. I wonder if I can even pick it up. Okay, so I have been, I guess, frustrated with my floss storage situation and organization situation. I don't like bobbinating. I think it's a waste of my time to like put everything on a bobbin, particularly if it's like new. I'll bobbinate stuff if I've used some strands of it, but I have enough of it to like keep using, but I'm never gonna like open up a package of DMC and put it on a bobbin and not use it for a while. And so I've been on the hunt for a new storage technique for my flosses, and on Facebook Marketplace my mom found me this, which is probably from like at a store, like a long defunct local needlework shop or something that would have sold anchor threads, which this is over, you can't see it. Over here, someone's painted over it, but this did at one point was like an anchor threads display case. And I haven't done it yet, but I have to put WD-40 on the drawers because they have trouble coming up. But, so basically these like come out and you can put the flosses. And yeah, my goal is to put maybe like 3 or 4 colors per floss, but this was like $40. And so this to me is like going to hopefully change the way that I store my flosses and the way that I stitch, because I have really been having trouble staying organized with my flosses, particularly my DMCs, because I don't have a full, whatever. You've seen it. I'll sit down and talk a little bit more. List. Like I don't have the full range because I actually don't have a great idea of which DMCs I have. Because they all just kind of like live in a plastic bag and are not organized at all. And every other organization technique I've figured out, I like don't have I don't care enough to maintain. And so for me, I need an organization technique that literally just involves me like taking the floss and putting it in somewhere and not having to do anything else to it. That to me, I can handle. So I'm going to use that. Another thing I wanted to talk about was like, I realized I'm not actually sure what y'all are talking about when you talk about samplers. It's Sampler September, right? I'm celebrating Sampler September. And I realized like I have very specific ideas about what I think a sampler is, which to me is like a collection of, maybe not small, but certainly a collection of motifs that like exist on a piece of fabric. Not independently of each other, but like related to each other, but unconnected. So it's not like an image base, it's like a smaller images that kind of exist on the fabric at the same time. That to me is how I've been talking about a sampler. And I have been wondering, like, am I wrong? Like, I don't think I'm wrong, but then sometimes you see people post stuff, or even like you see stuff online from like real museums of being like, happy Sampler September, I'm stitching an animal cracker. And the reason I always reference the animal crackers is because I stitch them. And so I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like shit talking other people's stitching. Right? Like there are things that like I would never stitch, but I will stitch animal crackers that kind of exist in that same space. And so I use animal crackers as like a stand-in for like any kind of whatever. You guys know what I mean? But like to me, an animal cracker is not a sampler. Because it's a picture. And it's just you're stitching a picture. But I don't know. yeah, and so I guess like I'm inviting you all to talk about how you would define a sampler, or like what you mean when you talk about samplers or things like that, because I maybe wonder if I've been a little bit too narrow in my definition of what a sampler is. Like, I don't think Fruits of Plenty is a sampler, which by Modern Folk Embroidery, which I'm stitching Fruits of Plenty by Modern Folk Embroidery. And I don't think it's a sampler, but I've seen a lot of people stitching it for Sampler September. I don't know. Something to think about. And also, if you have any like insight or you have any opinions about that kind of thing, I would actually really like to hear from you, because I wonder if I've been too close-minded. Maybe I need to open my heart up more. I also just want to say that like it's been a weird week here in America. I'm filming this on Wednesday. Last Wednesday, there was a targeted assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was like a far-right, ultra-racist political commentator. And I certainly saw it. I would assume anyone who's watching Stitch Apocalypse 12th Flosstube probably also saw it. I don't want to say shocking. It wasn't shocking to me. The outpouring of support that he got from certain sectors of the cross-stitch community. And I think that there have been a couple things happening with me on Flosstube, which is the like, I have a group of people around me who I think are like really cool, and I really support them, and they really support me, and like I love that, and like I think that's really awesome. But also at the same time, sometimes you watch other people's stuff and they're like, I've gotten nothing but support from the cross-stitch community. And like the reality is, seeing people like Stacey Nash and Teresa Kogut and like these major cross-stitch people liking posts being like, Charlie Kirk would have been a great president, as a gay man in an interracial relationship, has been kind of crazy. Has been kind of just like, oh, right. You know? Like, I understand that, like, it appeals to a certain type of person. I'm something close to that type of person. I grew up on a farm. I'm white. I grew up middle class and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I guess it's something I've been thinking about. I have unfollowed quite a lot of people on Instagram. There were a couple people who like that kind of stuff that I didn't unfollow them, because I think there's room for someone to say, like, I don't support political violence in any capacity. And those kinds of, at least the ones that I'm like, sure, like, we'll allow it, have also been posting about, like, the genocide in Gaza and, like, the assassination of the Minnesota lawmaker. And so, like, to me, I'm not going to get too worked up about somebody who's like, I don't think anyone should be killed for their free speech, because I think speech should be free, which is like, sure, like, I'm not going to argue with you. You're probably right, but I have a cynical heart. Yeah, I don't know. And it does make me wonder about the samplers, and it makes me wonder about just like reproduction and like why I'm drawn to reproduction. And have I accidentally gotten on some sort of like weird alt-right pipeline by picking up stitching, and the next thing you know, I'm gonna have like ChatGPT psychosis and be a trans maxer, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe. I hope not. I don't think so. But yeah, it's just been something I've been thinking about, and thinking about my stitching and like the choices I'm making, which are actually like, I would say they appear more conservative in the choices of the things I'm stitching, right? I'm not really stitching anything that's like love, me and my man. I mean, I am stitching those things, but you can't, unless I talk about it, I guess, you can't really tell. I don't know. Okay, that's kind of all I'm talking about. Happy Sampler September for all who celebrate. And for those of you who don't celebrate, honestly, you might be better than me. I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway,